Jamal had always loved walking home from school. The streets weren't perfect, but they were familiar. He knew the cracks in the pavement, the smell of fresh bread from Mrs. Patel's bakery, and the way the sun bounced off the old brick walls in the late afternoon. Today, the air was crisp and he had his headphones on, music soft in his ears, keeping him company on the quiet streets. He slung his backpack over one shoulder, feeling the familiar weight of his books and notebooks. As he turned the corner onto Cedar Street, a sudden sound of a car screeching made him stop. A patrol car pulled up abruptly beside him. Two officers stepped out, uniforms stiff and sunglasses reflecting the fading sunlight. Jamal's heart began to pound. He had seen police before in his neighborhood, but something about the way they looked at him made his stomach twist. "Hey, kid," one of them said, voice dripping with mockery. "Where are you headed in such a hurry?" Jamal paused, trying to sound calm. "Home, sir, just walking home from school." The older officer laughed, a sharp, hollow sound. "Home, huh? With all that in your bag?" He gestured to Jamal's backpack, tilting his head as if he already knew Jamal was guilty of something, even though he hadn't done anything wrong. Jamal swallowed hard, gripping the straps of his bag tighter. His voice shook slightly. "It's just my books and my homework. I'm not doing anything wrong." The officers exchanged glances, smirks spreading across their faces. "Sure you aren't," the younger one said, leaning against the car. "You don't look like the studious type, do you?" Jamal felt his chest tighten. The words weren't just rude, they carried something heavier, something that cut deep. It was the same feeling he had felt before, walking these streets as a black teenager, the same unspoken judgment, the same assumption that he was trouble before he had even opened his mouth. "I swear I'm just walking home," Jamal said, louder this time, trying to make them believe him. The older officer circled him slowly, eyes scanning him as if he were a specimen under inspection. "Do you often wander around these streets alone?" he asked. The question wasn't innocent. It was loaded. Loaded with suspicion. Loaded with a mocking tone that made Jamal feel smaller than he already felt. Jamal's legs shook slightly. He had to force himself to stay calm. Yes, I walk home every day," he said, hoping this would be enough. But the officers weren't done. The younger one laughed, pointing at Jamal. "Look at him. He's nervous. Classic. You nervous because you know you're up to something?" Jamal's chest burned. He could feel the tears threatening to spill, and shame mingled with fear in a way he had learned to mask with silence. He wanted to scream, to say something, anything to make them stop, but his words stuck in his throat. He had been told all his life to be careful, to not provoke authority, to survive encounters like this without making them angrier. The older officer shook his head, still smirking. "Pathetic," he muttered. "Think you're smarter than us? Think you belong anywhere but trouble?" Jamal's hands clenched into fists. He wanted to fight back, but he knew it wouldn't help. He only wanted to disappear, to get home, to escape the judgment, the sneers, the weight of a world that saw him as less before even knowing him. As the officers stepped closer, Jamal's phone buzzed in his pocket. His mother's name flashed on the screen. His heart jumped and he answered quickly. "Mom, the cops." His voice broke slightly. Through the phone, he heard her sharp intake of breath. "Jamal, where are you? What's happening?" Jamal could barely speak. He felt trapped, scared, and humiliated all at once. And in that moment, as the two officers continued to mock him, he wondered if anyone would ever see him as just Jamal, a boy trying to live, trying to walk home safely, trying to exist in a world that so often judged him before knowing him. And then he remembered his father, Marcus, strong, principled, and dedicated. The man who had always fought to protect and guide him. Jamal clung to that thought, hoping, just hoping, that someone like him could arrive before things got worse. The two officers laughed, their voices sharp and cruel, bouncing off the quiet street like echoes of judgment. Jamal stood frozen, gripping his backpack as if it could shield him from their mockery. Every word they spoke felt like a punch to his chest, every sneer a reminder that, in their eyes, He was less than human. "Look at this kid," the older officer said, circling Jamal slowly. "He thinks he can just walk around like he belongs anywhere. Funny, isn't it?" Jamal tried to respond, to explain, but his voice barely came out. I'm just going home," he stammered. The younger officer chuckled, stepping closer. "Home? With all this?" He pointed at Jamal's backpack again. "What are you hiding in there, huh? Homework? Or maybe something more interesting?" Jamal's hands shook. He wanted to scream, to tell them to stop, but the words stuck in his throat. Fear wrapped around him like a heavy blanket. He had learned early that some battles weren't worth fighting, at least not in the moment. He had learned to survive, to stay quiet, and hope for help to arrive. "Why do you always look so scared?" the older officer asked, his tone mocking. "It's cute, really. You know you're small, don't you? Small and easy to push around." Jamal's chest tightened. Every word pierced him. He had grown up hearing whispers and seeing glances, the subtle assumptions about him and his friends, the way people judged him before even speaking to him. But now the judgment was loud, raw, and personal. He wanted to vanish, to disappear, to become invisible, but his legs wouldn't move. "Kid, do your parents know where you are?" the younger officer asked, smirking. "They'd be surprised to see you out alone, wouldn't they?" Jamal's throat went dry. He swallowed hard, fighting back tears. He could feel humiliation bubbling inside him, a tight, burning anger he had nowhere to pour. He felt small, trapped, and powerless. All he wanted was to be seen as a normal kid, not as a target for ridicule. He looked around, hoping someone would pass by, anyone who would intervene, but the street was empty. The sun was dipping low, painting the sky orange, and everything felt heavier in that fading light. "Why are you so nervous, huh?" the older officer said, leaning closer, his shadow falling over Jamal. "It's okay to admit you're scared. Most kids like you are." Jamal's hands curled into fists. He wanted to fight, not the officers themselves, but the fear, the injustice, the way the world seemed stacked against him. He wanted to yell, to scream, to tell them they were wrong, that he wasn't a stereotype, that he was more than what they assumed. But he didn't. Instead, he held his head high as best he could, letting the officers talk, waiting for a miracle he didn't know if he deserved. Then his phone buzzed again. It was his mother calling back. His fingers trembled as he answered. "Mom, they're still—" His voice broke, choked by panic and shame. "Jamal." His mother's voice was sharp, worried, full of fear. "Where are you? What's happening?" They're mocking me," he whispered, unable to say more. His heart pounded so hard he thought it might burst. On the other end, his mother's voice trembled. Stay calm. Baby, I'm calling your father. He'll be there. He'll make it stop." Jamal's chest rose and fell rapidly. Hope flickered inside him, fragile and fleeting like a candle in the wind. He had always admired his father, Marcus, a man who had dedicated his life to justice, a man who had never backed down from protecting others. And now, just thinking of him, brought a strange calm in the middle of chaos. The officers noticed Jamal's momentary pause. "What's this?" the younger one said. "Getting a call from Mommy?" They laughed, cruel and loud. "Typical. Needs someone to protect him." Jamal felt the heat of anger mix with fear, a storm raging inside him. He wanted to shout, to make them feel a fraction of the humiliation he felt, but he stayed silent, gripping his backpack like it was the only anchor in a world that felt unsteady. And then, in the distance, headlights cut through the orange sky. A familiar car, moving fast. Jamal's heart leapt. Could it be? Hope, sharp and bright, ignited in his chest. Maybe someone who cared, someone with power and justice on their side was coming. Maybe the nightmare would end before it went too far. For the first time in minutes, Jamal allowed himself a small breath, a quiet prayer that his father would arrive. The roar of an engine broke through the mocking laughter, and Jamal's heart leapt. He looked up and saw a familiar car turning sharply onto the street. His father, Marcus, was coming. Marcus, the man who had always been his shield, his guide, the one who taught him courage even when the world seemed cruel, was coming. The officers barely had time to notice the car before it stopped in front of them. Marcus stepped out, his uniform crisp, his presence commanding. Even without a word, he radiated authority. Jamal felt a sudden rush of relief that made his knees weak. He had never felt so small and yet so safe at the same time. "Sir, we were just..." one officer started, but Marcus raised a hand. His eyes, sharp and steady, locked on them. "Stop," he said, voice calm but carrying a weight that made both officers pause mid-sentence. "I don't want to hear excuses. Leave him alone. Now." The younger officer shifted uneasily. He tried to maintain his arrogance, but it faltered under Marcus's gaze. He wasn't causing trouble, he muttered, though it came out less confident than he intended. Marcus's eyes narrowed. "You were mocking a 16-year-old boy," he said. "Do you understand what that means? Do you understand how it feels to make a child afraid of people who are supposed to protect him?" Jamal's chest tightened with emotion. He had been frozen in fear, humiliated and alone. But now, standing behind his father, he felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the son. It was safety. It was justice arriving in human form. "Sir, he's just a kid?" the older officer stammered. He tried to sound firm, but the words lacked conviction. "Exactly," Marcus said firmly. "A kid, a human being. Not a suspect, not a stereotype, not a target for ridicule. Leave him alone, or I will make sure this incident is addressed at every level." The officers exchanged nervous glances. Marcus's position wasn't just authority, it was power, principle, and the kind of integrity that demanded respect. The mocking smirks vanished, replaced by a wary, almost guilty silence. Jamal's eyes filled with tears. He had never felt so relieved, so protected. He wanted to speak, to thank his father, but the words stuck in his throat. Marcus knelt beside him, placing a strong hand on his shoulder. "Jamal," Marcus said softly, looking into his son's eyes, "you're safe now. I've got you." Jamal let the tears fall, silent but unstoppable. The fear that had gripped him for what felt like hours began to loosen. He could breathe again. He could feel the anger and humiliation start to fade, replaced by awe and gratitude. Marcus stood tall, facing the officers once more. "You have a duty to protect, to serve, not to humiliate. I hope you remember this day. I hope you remember what it means to misuse your power." Neither officer dared argue. They nodded quickly, murmuring something incoherent, and retreated back to their car, their confidence shattered. As the patrol car drove away, Jamal felt a mix of emotions: relief, pride, and a strange new sense of belonging. His father wasn't just a protector, he was a symbol of justice. Proof that the world could be fair, even in the darkest moments. Marcus knelt again, this time gently adjusting Jamal's backpack. "I know it's hard, son," he said quietly. "I know people can be cruel, but never forget, no one has the right to make you feel less than who you are. You are strong, you are smart, you are loved." Jamal's lips trembled. "Dad, thank you," he whispered, voice barely audible. I was so scared." Marcus pulled him into a brief hug, strong but comforting. "I know," he said. "And that fear, it's okay. It doesn't make you weak, it makes you human. But courage isn't the absence of fear, it's standing tall, even when the fear is there. And you did that, just by being yourself." Jamal nodded, the weight in his chest lifting, replaced by a new steady strength. He looked up at his father, eyes shining. In that moment, he understood something he hadn't before. No matter what the world tried to throw at him, he wasn't alone. And Marcus knew, as he watched his son stand a little taller, That one moment of fear had turned into a lesson of strength, resilience, and love that Jamal would carry forever. The street grew quiet once the patrol car disappeared, leaving Jamal and his father standing in the fading sunlight. Jamal's backpack felt lighter now, though the weight of the day still lingered in his chest. He looked up at Marcus, eyes wide, searching for words. "Dad," he began, voice small and shaky. "Why didn't anyone else step in?" Marcus sighed, placing a firm but gentle hand on his son's shoulder. "Some people don't know how to stand for what's right," he said softly. "Some people are too scared or too blind or too full of pride to see injustice when it happens. But that doesn't make it okay, Jamal. It just means we have to do better." Jamal swallowed hard, trying to absorb his father's words. He had felt humiliated, alone, powerless, and now, standing here with Marcus, he realized how much courage it took to face someone who had power over him and had used it cruelly. He wanted to understand, to make sense of it, but the tears threatened to return. "I hate that they saw me like that," he said quietly, looking down at his shoes. "Like I'm nothing, like I'm less." Marcus knelt to meet his son's eyes, his expression steady and warm. "Jamal, you are more than anyone else's opinion," he said. "Your value isn't decided by how some people see you. It's who you are, what you believe, and the choices you make. Today, you stood your ground, even when it was terrifying. That takes more strength than most people understand." Jamal's chest tightened again, this time with a mix of relief and pride. For the first time, he felt the fear of earlier hours transform into something else, into courage, into understanding, into hope. He realized that fear didn't have to crush him. It could be a signal that he was alive, aware, and strong enough to endure. "Dad," he whispered. "I was so scared. I didn't think anyone could save me." Marcus pulled him into a gentle embrace, holding him tightly for a long moment. "I know," he said, "and that's why I'm here. But you don't need someone to always save you. You need to know that even when things seem impossible, justice and love can find their way to you. And you can fight with your mind, your courage, and your heart." Jamal nodded against his father's chest. The words sank in slowly, weaving themselves into his thoughts like seeds of strength. He felt his tears dry, replaced by a warmth that made him feel seen and valued. They stood together in silence for a few moments, listening to the city around them. Cars passing, the distant laughter of children, the occasional bark of a dog. Jamal realized how normal life felt again, even after the fear and humiliation he had endured. He looked up at Marcus, eyes shining. "Do you think they'll ever see how wrong they were?" Jamal asked softly. "They may or they may not," Marcus admitted. "Some people never learn until they face consequences. But that's not for you to carry on your shoulders. Your job is to live, to be proud of who you are, and to treat others with respect, even when they don't treat you the same way. That's the power you have." Jamal nodded slowly, feeling a new sense of determination. The fear from earlier felt distant now, replaced by a quiet confidence. He knew the road ahead wouldn't always be easy. People might judge him unfairly, mock him, or try to belittle him again. But now he had something stronger than fear. He had his father's example, his guidance, and his own growing courage. Marcus finally stood, offering his hand to Jamal. "Come on, son," he said. "Let's get you home. You've earned a little peace tonight." Jamal took his father's hand, feeling safe and strong at the same time. As they walked together, the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The world still had darkness, but for the first time that day, Jamal felt a light inside him that no cruelty could erase. And Marcus knew, as they walked side by side, that his son had taken a step toward understanding something precious. Fear was temporary, courage was lasting, and love, especially a father's love, could protect even the most vulnerable, even when the world seemed unfair. The next morning, Jamal woke to the sound of birds chirping outside his window. Sunlight streamed through the curtains, but he didn't feel fully awake. The memory of yesterday's humiliation lingered in his mind, heavy and sharp. The mocking laughter, the cruel smirks of the officers, it all felt like it had left invisible marks on his chest. But then he remembered his father, Marcus, standing tall, commanding, unafraid. Marcus, who had arrived at just the right moment to protect him. The memory brought a strange warmth to his heart, a sense of safety that felt almost magical. Jamal sat up, rubbed his eyes, and took a deep breath. He wanted to remember the courage he had felt yesterday, the strength that his father had shown him. Downstairs, the breakfast table smelled like freshly cooked eggs and toast. Jamal's mother poured him a cup of orange juice, giving him a small, encouraging smile. "How are you feeling?" she asked. Jamal shrugged. "Better," he said softly. "But I still hate that they treated me like that." His mother nodded, her eyes filled with understanding. "I know, baby, and it wasn't fair. But yesterday you learned something important. You learned that fear can be faced, and that there are people who will fight for you when you can't." Jamal thought about it. He knew she was right. Fear had been there, but his father's presence had turned it into something else. Courage, hope, a reminder that he could survive even in the darkest moments. Later that morning, Marcus received a call from the local police department. The officers who had harassed Jamal had been reported, and there would be a formal investigation. Marcus explained the situation calmly but firmly, making sure they understood the seriousness of their actions. The officers could no longer hide. Behind arrogance or ignorance, they had to face the consequences. Jamal watched from the doorway, a strange mixture of pride and awe swelling in his chest. His father wasn't just his protector. He was a man who demanded justice, not for power or attention, but because it was right. Jamal realized that standing up for what is right often required courage, persistence, and patience. As the day went on, Jamal felt a shift inside him. The fear that had once made him feel small now felt lighter, replaced by determination. He walked to school that morning with his head held a little higher. He noticed the way the sun reflected off the sidewalk, the laughter of his friends, and even the sound of traffic, life continuing around him despite the darkness he had faced. At lunch, a friend noticed the change in him. "You okay, Jamal?" she asked. He smiled faintly. "Yeah, I had a rough day yesterday, but it's over now. Things are different today." Different. The word felt powerful in his mouth. He realized that one event, one terrifying encounter, didn't have to define him. What mattered was how he responded, how he let it shape him into someone stronger. Later, Marcus and Jamal walked together after school side by side. Jamal felt the strength of his father in his steps, but he also felt something else. His own, growing confidence. He didn't need to hide from fear anymore. He could face it just like yesterday, just like his father had shown him. "Remember, son," Marcus said as they approached their home. "Strength isn't just about muscles or power. It's about standing tall when others try to push you down. It's about courage, honesty, and love. And you showed that yesterday. I'm proud of you." Jamal smiled, feeling a warmth deep in his chest. He had been afraid, humiliated, and alone yesterday, but he had survived. And today he knew he could face whatever came next, with his father's lessons guiding him and his own courage growing inside. For the first time since yesterday, Jamal felt lighter. The world might not always be fair, but he had learned something invaluable. Fear could be faced, injustice could be challenged, and love, especially a father's love, could turn the darkest moments into strength. As they walked into their home, the sun dipped low behind the rooftops, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange. Jamal looked up, and for the first time in a long time he felt hope, not just for himself but for the world around him. The evening settled over the city like a soft blanket, and Jamal sat by his bedroom window staring at the streets below. The laughter of children, the distant hum of cars, and the glow of streetlights made the world feel normal again. But Jamal knew that yesterday had changed him. He had been scared, humiliated, and alone, but he had survived. And more than that, he had learned something he would carry forever. Marcus entered the room quietly, his presence calm but strong. He sat on the edge of Jamal's bed, giving his son a reassuring smile. "How are you feeling now, son?" he asked. Jamal shrugged, tracing a line along the windowsill. "Better, I think. But I keep thinking about yesterday. About them. About how cruel people can be." Marcus nodded, understanding written in every line of his face. "It's okay. To think about it, you should. That's how you learn. But remember, those people don't define you, they never could. What matters is how you respond to fear, to injustice, to cruelty. And yesterday you responded with courage, even if you didn't realize it at the time." Jamal looked up at his father, eyes wide. "I felt so scared, Dad. I didn't know what to do. I just froze." "That's normal," Marcus said softly. "Fear is natural. But courage isn't about never being afraid. Courage is about standing up, even when you are afraid. You may have frozen for a moment, but you held on. You stayed yourself. And that is more than many people can do." Jamal's chest tightened. The fear of yesterday seemed to shrink, replaced by something stronger, a sense of pride and understanding. He realized that his father's words were not just comforting. They were teaching him something he would need for the rest of his life. Marcus leaned back slightly, looking out the window with him. "The world isn't perfect, Jamal. There will be people who judge you unfairly, who try to make you feel small, who forget that you're human. But remember this. You are not alone. You have people who love you, who will protect you, who will guide you, and you also have your own courage. That is something no one can take away." Jamal nodded slowly, feeling a calm he hadn't felt since the officers first approached him. The anger, the humiliation, and the fear were still there, lingering like shadows. But now they were shadows he could face. He wasn't powerless anymore. "I think I understand," he said quietly. "I can't control what other people do or say, but I can control how I react. I can be strong." "That's right," Marcus said, smiling warmly. "And strength comes in many forms. Standing up for yourself, speaking the truth, showing respect, and protecting those who can't protect themselves. Those are real strength. You showed that yesterday in ways you may not even realize yet." Jamal leaned back, letting his father's words sink in. He thought about the mocking laughter, the cruel words, and the fear that had gripped him. And then he thought about the relief he had felt when Marcus arrived, the safety in his father's presence and the warmth of his words. For the first time he felt a balance between fear and courage, between doubt and confidence. "Dad," he whispered. "Thank you. I feel like I can face anything now." Marcus put a hand on his son's shoulder, firm and reassuring. "You can, Jamal. You have what it takes. And even when the world feels heavy, even when people are unfair, you'll remember this moment. You'll remember that you are strong, loved, and capable, and that will carry you through everything." Jamal nodded, a small smile forming on his lips. He looked out at the city, at the streetlights flickering like tiny stars, and felt a sense of peace settle over him. He realized that the world could be cruel, yes, but it could also be kind. It could offer love, protection, and guidance. And, most importantly, it could offer hope. As he climbed into bed that night, Jamal felt the weight of yesterday lift just a little more. He knew there would be challenges ahead, but he also knew something far stronger had been awakened inside him. Courage, resilience, and the unshakable belief that he could face the world, no matter what. And Marcus, standing in the doorway, watched, his son with pride, knowing that this was more than just a lesson. It was a turning point, a moment that would shape Jamal's life forever. The next morning, Jamal woke with a quiet determination. The fear and humiliation from days before felt like distant echoes now, replaced by a new sense of strength he could feel in his bones. He got ready for school slowly, taking his time, and for the first time in a long time, he felt like he could face the world on his own terms. As he stepped outside, Marcus was already waiting, leaning against the car with a warm smile. "Ready, son?" he asked. Jamal nodded, a little taller than usual. "Yeah, Dad, I'm ready." The walk to school was calm, almost peaceful. Jamal noticed the details of the street, the way the sunlight caught on leaves, the sound of distant voices, the hum of everyday life. He realized that life hadn't stopped, even when he had felt small and powerless, and now he could meet it head-on. When he arrived at school, his friends greeted him warmly. There were no questions about yesterday, no awkward stares, just normal, easy smiles. Jamal felt a rush of gratitude for their simple kindness. It reminded him that life was still full of people who could see him for who he truly was. During class, Jamal thought about the officers who had mocked him. He knew justice had been served, they had been reprimanded, and an investigation had been launched. But more importantly, he understood that he didn't need anyone else's approval to feel strong. He had his father's words, his father's guidance, and now, most importantly, his own courage. After school, Marcus picked him up again. They didn't speak much at first. The silence was comfortable, filled with understanding. Finally, Marcus broke it. "Jamal, do you know why I did what I did?" Jamal thought for a moment. "Because you're my dad? Because you care about me?" Marcus smiled, proud. "Yes, that too, but also because I wanted you to see that standing up for what is right matters. People need to know that cruelty has consequences, not just for them, but so you know that the world can be fair if we fight for it." Jamal nodded. He thought about the fear he had felt, the humiliation, and how it had been transformed into something else: confidence, understanding, and hope. He realized that the moment his father had arrived was more than protection. It was a lesson that he would carry forever. That evening, Jamal sat by the window again, watching the sky turn shades of orange and purple. He felt something, deep inside, a sense of strength that was no longer borrowed from his father. It was his own. He knew the world could be cruel, unfair, and full of people who judged before knowing. But he also knew that he could face it, with courage, integrity, and the lessons he had learned. Marcus came in quietly, sitting beside him. "You did well, Jamal," he said softly. "I couldn't be prouder." Jamal smiled, feeling the warmth of his father's pride. "I couldn't have done it without you," he whispered. Marcus shook his head gently. "No, son, you could. You just didn't know it yet. You learned yesterday, and now you're ready for anything life throws at you." For the first time in days, Jamal felt truly free. He understood that fear was temporary, but courage was lasting. He realized that humiliation could be transformed into strength and cruelty into lessons. And above all, he knew that love, especially a father's love, could change the outcome of even the darkest moments. As the stars began to appear in the night sky, Jamal looked up and felt hope bloom inside him. The world would not always be fair, but he had learned how to face it. He had learned that strength comes from within, and that courage can shine brightest in the moments we feel weakest. And Marcus watched him, knowing that this moment, the moment of fear, of protection, and finally of understanding, had shaped his son into someone ready to face the world, strong, proud, and unafraid. Jamal took a deep breath, feeling the night air fill his lungs. He smiled softly to himself, knowing he had survived, he had grown,